They started somewhere around 250 BC, 2,500 BC, and the civilization collapsed around 900 AD. 2,500 BC, that's when Nebuchadnezzar was building his gardens. That's when the Egyptians were building their pyramids. So our little neighbors south here were really early learners in the isolation of the Yucatan. For millennia, the Maya stared with fascination into the transparent sky at the fixed orbs of light and the rovers of the planets. With profound thought, they became an uncanny sense of the universe and the cosmos, and became the world's best astronomers. The other thing is, they were we still don't know, I'm reaching for a pen. We're looking at Orion here, and these three stars here, which we all recognize as Orion's belt, we didn't know that this star there was a nebula, but the Mayas did, well until powerful telescopes were developed. How Maya did it? We don't know. But they studied the Milky Way with its dark trough down the middle and forecasted huge amounts of astronomy with that. The wonders, like the comets, but the fascination with time and space paid off. After millennia of viewing the heavens, the Maya developed a belief system based on the cosmos. They were obsessed with the cosmos and they became the world's best astronomers. This obsession created their cognitive thought process that created their scientific civilization in isolation. They had a unique concept of time and space that only became a modern standard. They believed in quantity and quality of time. They believed in linear time and cyclic time. They believed in undifferentiated past, present, and future time. They believed in temporal cycling, where they could go back in time and cycle forward in the future to set important dates. That's like history repeating itself. This inspired the Maya to remember the future and anticipate the past. They had what we call the quadripartite cosmos philosophy. They divided the cosmos into four quadrants, calculated time as a four-dimensional simultaneous event, integrating the three spatial dimensions, which we all engineers know about, X, Y, and Z. Along with time, they have a four-dimensional point for every time incident. This is similar to our concept of the space-time continuum in physics. This space-time continuum in a cosmic theory motivated pure sciences developed by the Maya. Astronomy and uncanny knowledge of the cosmos. The mathematics had calculations of astral projections and unbelievable, elegant calculations. And they had one of the world's 5 original written languages. And they developed all these sciences in the isolation of the Yucatan. There was no Greeks or Romans or any other cultures to aid them. In the astronomical sciences, just to give an example, in astronomy, we're going to be mainly talking about technology, but this is a crossover. If you look at the solar year, the period of the moon, and the period of Venus, and the first column has the Maya calculation, and the second column has the modern calculations. For the year, almost identical. In fact, they say the Maya are a little closer than we are. The period of the moon is within 2 10,000ths. The period of Venus is 3 thousandths of a day off, and the period of Mars is just off by 600ths. In mathematics, they use only 3 symbols for their mathematics, a dot, a bar, and a shell. They invent the properties of the number 0, the first in history. 300 BC, they developed 0 as a number, not just a placeholder like 1 0 is 10, 2 zeros is 100. They had it 1,400 years before the Europeans, who got it from the Arabs, who got it from the Hindus. Who the Hindus got it from? Maybe the Maya, who knows? They were able to calculate all mathematical functions and calculate a large array number used in tracking positive and negative time. And time was everything. Look at the last number down there. That's 41 with 30 zeros behind it. We don't even use numbers like that. We don't know what the number was. used for, but it was in one of their glyphs. This is an example of Maya mathematics. The top table is the base 20 number system. They didn't use 10 like we do, the decimal system. They used 20. And the 0 is a shell, and 1 is a dot is a 1, and so on. To get to 5 is a bar. Now, for the folks who get the book or have the book, I have a simple problem in mathematics, just arithmetic down on the lower part. And they use a positional mathematics, so that as you move upwards in the calculations, the first line is 1, then 20, then the square of 20, that's 400, then 8,000, and 160,000. So that's how you would calculate in Maya. Somebody said the other day, it sounds complicated. Well, if it's the only way you know how to do math, that's the way you did it. The Maya written language is one of the 5 original written languages in world history. It's a complex writing system that's visually striking with over 800 symbols. They could write anything they could say. It's an example of their script, we call it, and the glyphs. And the sharp-eyed people can see the numbers there, the bars and the dots. So why would the Maya be forced to develop technology? Well, they had a lack of metal ore to fabricate tools. There was no iron or copper, and archaeologists call them Stone Age culture because of that. Lack of beasts of burden for wheel transport. Archaeologists called them not knowing the wheel. Inconsistent rainfall in seasonal desert. They had 6 months of rain and 6 months of absolutely dry. Very few bodies of surface water due to poor subsurface. And all you geoscientists in here know what karstic limestone is. It sucks water right down into the aquifer as soon as it rains. So there was no lakes or very few rivers, etc. The tool technology has baffled archaeology, or they didn't care about it. They said for years, until recently, to my book anyway, that all these incredible Maya art on the facades was done with flint tools and wooden hammers. Bas-reliefs are just as well done as anything in the West. 3-dimensional figures, huge masks. So let's look at the geology of the Yucatan. They did not have any metal. The closest iron ore is 200 kilometers away, 2,000 kilometers away in the present state of Colima. But they did down right at the edge of Guatemala and Mexico today have a plate, edge of the North American tectonic plate and the Caribbean plate. They had a subduction zone, and that zone produced jadeite. Not jade, but jadeite. It's a similar material, but it's harder. And there's a ring of volcanoes that produce obsidian. And they took these two materials and made them into unbelievable tools. Obsidian, I think everybody knows what it is. It's harder than iron, and it's 5.5 in the Mohs scale. It's a mineraloid. It doesn't have any crystalline structure, and it's a volcanic glass. Maya made this tool simple, just sort of like we did. The blades on the left are like our old straight razors. They used to be used before the safety razor. And on the right is a knife that's shaped like a knife. So the obsidian is still being used today. It's the sharpest edge of all blades, so it's used in scalpels. It can be honed to molecular edge thickness. It's about 100 times sharper than a steel scalpel. So let's see how they shaped this unbelievable civilization. The property is jadeite. Now, jadeite is only found in 2 places in the world, in the Yucatan and in Myanmar. There's some other places got small amounts, but it's harder than steel. It's 6.5 to 7 on the Mohs scale. Tougher than steel. It has the equigranular structure that makes it really, really tough. It's a pyroxene mineral. It's formed in a tectonic subduction zone at high pressure and low temperature. I told you to get that right. I was talking to geologists earlier. And black jadeite, which you'll see, because everybody usually sees jade in jewelry that's green or white, but these are black jadeite for tools. It was the same, but it wasn't as valuable. Same properties. The Maya and the Olmecs before them first used jadeite as jewelry and objects of art, and they learned to work this very hard material into objects of art, into masks, into other things. So, jadeite, the source of jadeite could not be found for hundreds of years. In fact, the geology books at the turn of the 20th century said that jadeite did not have a native place in the Americas. It was all imported from China. Well, we know better than that. So this is the Motagua Valley along that tectonic plate I showed you. And these are actually jadeite boulders. And this is how they appear. Some are a lot bigger, as big as 60 tons. And this is my colleague, who's an expert on Maya tools, digging in the ground because we found an old workshop. And this is the debitage from the working of the jadeite. So, what did they make with these tools? What did they look like? Well, they made all kinds of specialized tools. Chisels, gouges, adze, axes, the same things we use now. This is a toolkit with a sculptor working on a stele. And this is an array of chisels. You look carefully. One end is sharp, the other end is blunt. And these are gouges, and you look at the lower end, they all have a scoop out, and you use a gouge out stone. Let's look at them closer. On the left, you have a Maya jadeite chisel. On the right, you see a modern chisel. The jadeite chisel could use a little sharpening, but notice how they are the same tool. The gouge, at the bottom, you see the Maya gouge with its gouge-like shape, and a modern gouge on the right. Axes, they're similar. And archaeologists didn't discover these things until just recently, when they read my book. Anyway, this is how you work the chisels. It's true. And you can work jadeite chisels into limestone very easily. Now, my specialized tools were harder than iron, obsidian for the world's sharpest blades, and jadeite for specialized carving tools for hard stone. So, myth and truth, archaeological myth. The Maya were Stone Age culture because they did not possess metal tools. The technological truth is the Maya fabricated tools harder than iron and tougher than steel, and they should be classed as a technolithic culture. Hydraulic cement. We all know the Romans had cement. We know we have cement. We invented our cement in 1851. Joseph Asplin, a Brit, patented it at that time. The Maya invented theirs 300 BC, and it's almost the same. We'll see that. It was, well, they made cast-in-place concrete from their cement, and these are ruins of a century ago that were just being uncovered. These are concrete structures that lasted thousands of years, over 1,000 years, in the jungle with all the weather and all the earthquakes, and they're still standing because they're made out of cast-in-place concrete. And this is an example of how they built their walls. They used an outside layer of work stone and poured very large aggregate cast-in-place concrete inside, so they had a composite structure. So how did they make it? This cement was used to build structures for the grand cities. It was, they invented the fabrication process, as I said, in 300 BC. And they used thermodynamic technology. We'll see that in a minute. Cement produced cast-in-place concrete that enabled Maya structures to endure against time and nature. This is a Maya limestone mine. Looks familiar. Now this is their thermodynamic reactor. Well, to most people it looks like a pile of wood with some rocks on it, and that's what it is. But they developed a method that had a hole down the center that would enhance the flow of oxygen, and they put their limestone raw material on top, and once you get limestone to 69 degrees Celsius, it melts and becomes cement. That's the way we do it now. This is the pile after it's been burned, 36 hours. Now, this is how it works. You've got the cement kiln, and down the middle, there's a hollow chamber, and you start the fire inside. It starts burning, it gets hotter, and the temperature goes down lower. As temperature goes down, it sucks in oxygen-rich air from the outside, the blue arrows, and the fire becomes hotter and it recycles. And this picture was taken at Chichen Itza. And they used this technique to rebuild the structures there. And archaeologists just didn't notice. I found this in an archaeological handbook, by the way. And nobody recognized the brilliance of this system. It was just like a blast furnace, way ahead of Mr. Bessemer. So if you look at this engineering drawing, you can see the tube down the middle, the cylinder with fire in it, and it gets hotter and draws air in from the outside, and it burns to like 1600 degrees. And there was a whole bunch of elements and techniques to use. With the wood had to be a certain wetness and dryness, et cetera, but it worked. It still works. Okay, I missed my guys. I ran into three scientists from, there you go, thank you, from the University of Mexico, Ramirez, Perez, and Diaz. And they had gone on a mission of proving that I was wrong. And so they tested the concrete, and they found, they became disciples, let's put it that way. They did some great work. I'm going to show you that. They went to actually to the sites. We'll see some of this later. This is one of my structures that I used, not mine, but they belong to the state of Mexico. And they took samples right from the field, and they ran an analysis. Now here is the comparison between Maya and Portland cement, a modern cement. And you can see the first 6 or 7 elements, carbon, oxygen, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, and calcium, are very similar. 94% of the Maya cement is similar to Portland cement. They're slightly different quantities, but just like making a cake. Everybody doesn't use the same formula, but it worked. At the bottom, you see yttrium. And if anybody here knows their geology, that's what we use lasers to make lasers with. So people say, what did they have that in there for? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out one day. And then they check the physical properties and the strength, the modulus of elasticity, the weight of concrete, the posilith index, all of the factors that make good concrete checked out were very similar. Of course, the maximum strength was 2,500 PSI, which is about what we had, say, in the middle part of the last century. That's what we called for like 3,000-pound concrete. So they tested the cement at the, well, that's a unanimous, autonomous University of Mexico. And they found that it had physical and chemical properties very similar to cast-in-place concrete. So, only one more thing to do. Did this thing really work? So we made a scale model. Now, we couldn't make the big one because we did this in Austin, Texas, and I'm sure we would still be in jail if we built that big fire. So anyway, we built a scale model for the History Channel. And ours, as you see on the right, is a lot smaller, and it's only 3 foot diameter, but the left is the Maya model. And we had Michael Guillen, who was the host of the show, start the fire and get it going, and reading the pyrometer we had, we got up to 800 degrees Celsius. Now, we knew we couldn't make 1,600. We didn't have enough fuel. But you see how the flame is projecting skyward vertically like it's supposed to, like it's being forced out by this, was what proved it. Now, that is a yellow flame, which is about 800 or 900. But as you know, the color of the flame indicates its heat. So you don't really need a pyrometer. The lighter it gets, the bluer and the whiter, the higher the temperature. So, what did we find out from this testing? Vertical flame was successful. The temperature levels were achieved by scale model. 800 degrees was, by similitude, much more than the 1,600 we needed. The thermodynamic function of cement, the cement kiln was successfully demonstrated, and the Maya kiln was able to melt limestone and produce Maya cement. So, archaeological myths. Maya constructed Stone Age masonry and mortar structure. By the way, this, I'm talking to engineers here, I couldn't do this with archaeologists. Archaeologists would argue with me that they did not have cement, and I'd say, what's this? And they'd say, that's mortar. I've got mortar and cement. What? I said, it looks like cement, holds like cement, it smells like cement, you got cement. So anyway, technology of truth was a Maya constructed, fabricated cement 2,000 years before it was patented by British inventors. Maya cement was used to construct cast-in-place concrete structures. And we'll get into concrete in a little bit because we'll give the Romans their due here. Maya structural engineering. They didn't build wooden roofs. The houses started out as huts, as people have seen have gone to the Yucatan. They still live in them. But they had, the building tools included hydraulic cement, cast-in-place concrete, composite stone and concrete structures, concrete admixtures. Yes, they use latex. They use polymers to make it work better. High-strength structural timber and high-strength rope cables, 20,000 PSI. We call it high-strength. Anyway, Roman concrete. Romans did have concrete, but it was a natural volcanic material mined near Mount Vesuvius called pozolith. It was mixed with sand and lime and water to produce concrete. Material enabled Roman engineers to construct arches, vaults, and domes. And it was about 1,200 PSI. And when that concrete ran out, there was a limited amount. This is your expendable resources. They quit using cement in Europe until, I think they used it only for Leonardo da Vinci. No, Michelangelo. Get those guys mixed up. So, with the Maya, they developed an arch. It was sort of like their house. The arch was derived from the basic design of the Maya house. This is called a na. If you looked inside, it's sort of straight walls and an arch. Something like the classic arch. On the left, you see what's called a corbel arch and the circular arch in the middle. Archaeologists call the middle arch the true arch. And they call the Maya arch, which you see on the right, which is a stable structure with its own horizontal resistance, while the other two arches you see need external forces to stabilize their horizontal actions as the structure works. They call this, and still the false arch. Now, this is what it looked like. They had the two layers of stone on the outside, and they would use very high-strength timber as tie rods. This is called chicosapotle wood, and it's 2,000 PSI. And I'll show you photographs of some that lasted 1,400 years in a few minutes. And so the inside was filled with cast-in-place concrete. Now I'm showing smaller aggregate, but they used large aggregate, but the concrete adhered to the sidewalls very well and worked fabulously, and they're still standing after, I don't know, 12, 14, 1,500 years. So this is how simple it was to build. He built the sidewalls, and this wasn't done in a day. We didn't have early concrete. It may take some time. You built the vertical wall, put the concrete inside, and lay up the first thrust beam. And then you start moving inward, and as the forces, you can see the free body up top, start trying to pull inward, you put another arch tie in there and keep building until you complete the arch. I mean, it's a small cartoon, but they believe it now. So my arches, they're used in single monumental arrays. This is at Baad, at the beginning of a big road, and this is at Labna, the entrance to the city. Now, my wall was the way the Maya developed interior spaces in their palaces and their temples. They took an arch and extended it longitudinally so that they developed a shape. And most of them are like 12 feet by 20 feet, which is about the size of a hotel room, modern hotel room, and exactly the same size as a hut. But they used, it was a good room, and they liked it, why change it, right? So then if you want to have walls, air coming in, you could build a colonnade. And here's an example of, just is at a place called East Tampak. Those beams are to 1,400 to 1,500 years old, and they're still in good shape. And a lot of them had curves, and if this was, they were curved not for structural reasons, but because they reflected light. So when the Maya lit a lamp, they would have, they're actually parabolic in shape. And the inside would be coated with the plaster. See the plaster inside? I'm showing this old photo because most of the plaster has deteriorated. See the plaster inside? So the inside and outside were well plastered. And somebody thought they were an architect here, so I always feel this picture. That's a little strange. So, colonnades, you want a nice porch with some breeze blowing, stays around 100 degrees, you need the trade winds. So, the Maya vault was a basic module for multi-room, single-level, and multi-level structures. So how do they work? Just like we do our structures now. We line up the load paths. So you want one arch, you got it. 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a nice 5 cell home. Let's do a second story. Line up the load paths. There's a second story building up. So we got a second level. You want a penthouse? No problem. There you go on top, okay? But all the load paths line up, and this is something we understand, but they don't. And then you finish it up with stairs and plaster and a lot of decoration on the outside. Single-story structures, examples are Schlappak and at Uxmal. Many of you have seen this. And multi-stories, 2-story structures, 3 stories, a beautiful building at Ishtampak, and 5-story. They didn't do this in Europe until, in the United States, until Chicago, 1885. So the circular structures were the Maya vault, except rotated around in a circle to generate a circular interior space. This is at Chichen Itza, which you saw, you weren't allowed in, but in the old days I could take pictures. So this is the interior of the vault as it circles around. You see the beams inside, and this is a similar observatory. That was an observatory we just saw at a place called Mayan. This is not a hollow structure, but it sure is pretty, and I always like to show it, just like this one. We don't know why they built this or what it was used for, but it's a wonderful circular structure. So, the pyramid, the tallest structure in the Amboy Forest. Everybody had a really nice pyramid, and most of them were built 2 or 3 times. This one is small, it is 3 structures. They built one, and they built another on top of it, and a third one. Chichen Itza, which you tried to climb last week, Kim, is 2 structures. And did they allow you to go inside and see the interior of the first one? Okay, no. And this is at Palenque, this is once built. This is the only tomb that was found for many years. And at Tikal, this was Temple 4. So how did they build it? Let's show how they did it with the stage. Number 1 is the first king. He built a pyramid. Nice, biggest one around. So the second king came in, and he built on top of the second one. Now, what I'm showing here is the structure was not all cast-in-place concrete. What we have here, well, he says, there it is. What we have here is concrete and stone fill, and then cast-in-place retaining walls, and then a concrete facing on the outside with all kinds of stucco and ornaments. Then King 3 came along and said, okay, I'm going to show you guys how to build pyramids. So he did the same thing with the fill and the retaining walls and the outside structure, and then he put his temple on top. They always have a temple on top, with 2 vaults and what's called a roof comb. A roof comb is like a party hat. They would put, I'll show you some right now. They would put the crown on the pyramids. They were perforated, and they would hold all kinds of unbelievable sculpture, mirrors for light reflection, sound and light, like chimes and stuff like that, that would give you a feeling of awe and power for these things on top. And also, structurally, archaeologists thought they made the holes in them and made them lighter because they wouldn't crush the structure below. Right, the holes inside in the roof comb are for reducing wind resistance and reducing the mass under earthquakes, and there were lots of earthquakes down there. So that was at Yaxchilan. Here we are at the Rio Bec area with another beautiful wall, and here's a shot of the hollow. These are sort of concrete space frames that are made to resist. This has been there for 1,500 years. And another shot of a Temple of the Cross at Palenque. So, archaeological myth. Maya used Stone Age materials for construction. They did not have cast-in-place concrete. The Maya arch was called a false arch. Technological truth, which nobody here will argue with me, I'm sure, but you can if you want. Maya used high-strength concrete and structural geometry for construction. The Maya arch was actually a trapezoidal truss, for those that are interested. That confuses them a lot, so I use that word. Okay, they were America's first settlements here. When I say America, they are in North America. The United States is in North America. Canada is in North America. They are our heritage. They were part of our background. And of course, we didn't come around for another 500 years after they passed away, but we had to save the civilization from the seasonal desert. As I said earlier, they had 6 months of rain and 6 months of dry season. If I finish early, you'll get a bonus. Okay, this is a January through December chart. You can see that during dry season here, you have, these are millimeters, less than 100 millimeters of rain in the rainiest month. But over here, you've almost got half a meter of rain during the rainy season. So the Maya had to conserve water during the rainy season to use during the dry season, as we do now in engineering. Uh-oh, I get this all the time. They didn't dope this out on their own. All that mathematics, astronomy, they had help from the extraterrestrials, right? Well, except for one. Everybody knows about this one. The single visitor was 65 million years ago, a meteorite hit the Earth and destroyed the dinosaurs. We know that one. And where did it hit? That's only supposed to show up once. Oh, no, come on. You better click it for me. I got to tell you, every time I come to a new venue, something, I will tell you, we thought we had it all worked out. Okay, this is the edge of the Yucatan. This is a NASA photo. You see the circle here? That's the Gulf of Mexico out there. And here's a ring of what are called sinkholes or cenotes now, where they go all the way down to the aquifer. So you could get water right from the aquifer from the ground surface. As I say in the book, the same meteor that killed the dinosaurs allowed the Maya to live. And this is a cross-section of their geology. Pay attention, geoscientists. This is all caustic limestone, and this is the interior. And you'll see that these arrows are, the soil on the Yucatan is only 8 inches to 3 thick total. There's no, that's why they had trouble growing things. And water would go right down into the porous rock, limestone, and into the aquifer. And then down in this zone here, I'm showing the area where we showed the cenotes, the natural wells, and actually come out in the Caribbean. You can actually go out 100 feet from the shore and see water, fresh water bubbling out in the limestone, not limestone, in the water, seawater. So, how did the Maya civil engineers handle this? You had a different situation in different parts of the Yucatan. We just saw the natural wells. They use underground structural storage reservoirs to save water during the rainy season, surface reservoirs, aqueducts, and technological enhancements of agriculture. The cenotes are what we just talked about. There's your ring, the Chicxulub crater. And so where did it get that name? There's a town right near the center called Chicxulub. Good name. Put them on a map. Anyway, all these green dots are natural wells. And I'm showing a little close up here how the wells work. Some are collapsed, some haven't caved in completely, but they're still using them. This is a rendering from 1839 of how deep the Maya had to go for the water when it was dry season. And now this is a shot I took of an underground cenote that was a swimming hole. The shaltoon means wet rock, and it is a device for collecting water during the rainy season and storing it for the dry season. Now here, all the buildings, this is a rather flat terrain, which most of the Yucatan is. The buildings were all sloped downward, and the hardscape and the patios were all sloped towards these underground reservoirs, which were held about 50,000 liters each. So depending on the size of the town, depending on the number of shaltoons you needed. And up close, we can see our old friend, the Maya Truss is in there, and it's still made of rocks on the inside and concrete on the outside, but the interior is lined with stucco, which is waterproof, as you know. So that would hold water They make these large enough for an 18-month supply. And this is actual photographs of sheltoons that I have encountered. This is the interior of one. You can see they weren't very careful with their stucco, but it's still water after 1,500 years. And this is one at Rio Beck. That's a really nice one. And the interior, nicely finished. Now, that's okay. Open reservoirs. In some places, they had proper hilly ground. This is at Tikal, and they made a series of open reservoirs and used really ingenious engineering because the large reservoirs on top would be connected to the lower ones, and they would be connected with weirs and check dams and all the kind of things that civil engineers that do this kind of stuff do today to control water with natural flow. This is a model showing the reservoir on the roof. And how did they keep the water from evaporating in that heat? Water lilies. The water lilies covered the top surface and cut down the rate of evaporation. Brilliant. Not only that, the water lily is a natural, I'm going to call it water purifier, okay, in simple terms. It promotes the growth of helpful bacteria and destroys unwanted materials. This is being used in many places now for cities of 100,000 or under. Okay, I put this in. This is a good places sometimes had too much water. This is in Palenque had too much water. They had 51 springs under the city, running through the city, and they needed to claim that land for the city, so they built a whole series of aqueducts like this. This is a drawing one, okay? And they were shaped like their truss, but in some of the places they would build a wall and then lower the diameter of the chamber, and that would cause a head of water, and they used that head of water to lift water into the palaces so they could have running water for their toilets, domestic uses, and fountains. And this is a nice shot of one that's still standing. You see the truss beam here is stone. So the Maya had all these people. Somehow they developed technology to enhance the water supplies, to enhance the agriculture, and they developed a society of 15 million people on land that would only support 2 million if you use conventional methods. So they use methods like what are called raised fields. They find bajos or swamps or marshlands, and they dig canals in them and pile the dirt up in the middle, and they could get 4 crops a year out of these rather than the usual one. And you could grow a whole variety of crops on top, and then when it was low, you could grow crops in the middle, in the trenches, and those trenches would also support agriculture. Now here's some aerial photographs, and you can see that these are the remains of some of the raised fields. You can see the canals and the raised fields, and here's another shot in Belize. In some places they found 100 square kilometers of these fields, which means they had a really big production area because they needed, some of the cities were 100,000 people. They take a lot of food. So they used terrace fields that made hillsides viable for agriculture. Just a plain gravity wall with dirt behind it. Not only stored water, but claimed land that could be used on the side of a hill. This is an actual photo of not neat, but it worked and it's still standing after all these years. And there's a view of a hillside with some terraces on it. Water filtration, you can imagine what the water tasted like in these underground cenotes, not cenotes, but the sheltoons after 18 months. It becomes yucky and turbid. But so the Maya solved that too. They discovered that the problem with karstic limestone, it being porous, also worked to their advantage when it came to filtering. They had 2 kinds of filter. This is one, but the inside would be filled with water, and it would produce water as pure as a modern water filter as it dripped out through the interstices and the porous porosity of the limestone. And we had large bodies of water. This is at Chichen Itza. You probably saw these piled up behind a fence. They still don't know what they are. When I first went there in 1967, I made a joke. I thought they were pre-Columbian practice bombs. But later, when I grew up, I found out they were really filters. And that structure was a water plant that they were sitting next to, where water would be entered at the top and drained through the bottom. The Maya Interstate Highway System. The Incas get a lot of credit for building long roads, but they were made out of stone. But the Maya made their highways between big cities because they had big business. The Maya really were big business in trade. So their big business required good roads, and the success of the scientific civilization depended on trade and communications. They were very big on exchanging ideas and exchanging technology. And you had a tremendously varied environment, rainforest and mountains. So they needed, here's their criteria. Build me a wide paved concrete road surface so I could use it during the rain and during the dry season. Make it 30 feet wide and 1 meter above the ground outside to protect it from the water and the growth of the jungle. Structural features, make it out of paved concrete with stone sidewalls. So this is their design. They use stone sidewalls, a stone fill, then concrete infill, and then a very nice paved surface that had a crown on it for drainage. And a little cross view here of how it was close up. And then a little, there's your sidewalls going in, and then we come in with stone fill, not quite this big, and then concrete to top it off, and then pave it at the end with fine paving. I'll show you some of these pictures of the paving. Some of it still exists. Well, you hit that, Tom, it wants to repeat. Okay, the Romans had great roads, except they didn't have the luxury of having the concrete to pave it with. So they used stone embedded and gravel, and then they used stone for the walking surface. But they didn't have to elevate their roads because they didn't have the jungle to be concerned with. And these roads are still standing. This is a map of the Sauk Bay. The roads are called Sauk Bay, and the plural is Sauk Bayab. This is the northern part of the Yucatan, and this is, if you're familiar with it at all, this is, well, he says, that's Chichen Itza there. No, I'm sorry, that's Chichen Itza there. That's Cancun and Merida. So these roads are known to exist. I've surveyed these, but the one we're going to be looking at is this road here between Coba and Yashuna, which is the most complete road. Archaeological survey, the first one was carried out by the Carnegie Institution of Washington in 1934. It was called Villas, by Antonio Villas, carried it out. 20 men, it took a month cutting away across the 100-kilometer roadway. This is a modern map showing the route, which is almost as straight as we see there. And this is what they gave Villas to survey with, a Bruton compass. Well, this is a great compass, and it's called a transit, but it's great around like one site, but if you go 100 kilometers, it's not going to be real accurate. We'll see that in a minute. So here they are starting off on a ruin in Yashuna on the 20th of February, 1934. And they went along the way, and they have the only really good pictures of the Sauk Bay. It didn't have cut, it didn't have fill, it just followed the road as it went along, the ground as it went along. And this is a side wall. The man standing at a very high wall, which was a culvert. And this was the map that Villas drew that shows the route down here from Yashuna to Coba, which we will see in a little bit. We're going to come to the future, to come forward to my surveys, 1995 to 2005. Why did it take so long? I don't know, I'm slow, I guess. 1995, we did a GPS ground survey to check on the veracity of the route, and the structure. Then we had a ground-based survey in 2000, 2005, an aerial survey, and 2008, a remote sensing survey. So the first survey was to check the route by global positioning. So this is that ruin we saw at Yashuna. We started there. And there I am with a 1995 Tribble navigator. It took me an hour to get one satellite. It took 3 or 4 hours to get them all. We got good readings in the end. So then this was at Koba. We explored a sort of it's a pyramid in the middle of the road. It was like a toll booth. And that's one of my guys there. And this is the other end. So this is what we using GPS. From Koba to Yashuna, we had the readings, which we checked later. And the bearing was actually east-west is 270. It was 269, 58, 32, but 0.999 accuracy. I don't think we could do that today. Uh-oh. This is the ground survey. That's okay, Tom. I got a hair trigger on this thing. During the time between 95 and 2000, folks came in and restored the ruins. So we see the structures that we've been seeing in piles of rock state. And this is the structure that they were standing on at the beginning of the village survey. And you see the road coming down there and taking off into the distance. There is an example of 1,500-year-old pavement. That's pavement in Georgia that hasn't lasted that long. A lot less time. No, I was kidding about that. But they made good concrete. And this is the other end of the Sauk Bay at Koba. And it just ended like the other one did, and you stepped off. So I carried out an aerial survey in 2005. I want to make sure that everything went from Koba to Yashuna. And you can see the line of trees that is along the Sauk Bay. They didn't cut the trees because there was so much rock, so they left it so you could see it. And we get to the Yashuna end, and here's the ruins we just saw a few minutes ago. And there's our Sauk Bay taking off there and going back, and we fly back along the route. And we confirmed that it was there, and people believed it after that. But then again, then comes Google Earth. I could have saved all that airplane money. I could have saved a lot of things. Here we are with a current image. Look how clear that is at Yashuna. You see the green lines, which show the route. And then we go over to Koba. There's I can't see very well with the lights on this thing. One cycle coming that way and one coming this way. You can see it better in a photo. But this is, I can't believe how valuable this is, the Google Earth is for me, and not only in this kind of work, but in engineering. So the comparison surveys, what did they look like? Well, Bill, this is the yellow one, because he was using a compass. He got off a little bit. He got up by like 5 kilometers. He really hit the mark, but in reality, if you take his survey and you plot it, you get this. My survey, the GPS was, a true east-west line, and then if you follow the current satellites, you can see that it did wander around, but it stayed somewhere in the east-west route. So, summary of the combined surveys: the structure and the geometry of the Sauk Bay was verified. The route of the Sauk Bay, extending from Koba to Yashuna, was verified. The length of the route was verified. And I verified that the concept of the Sauk Bay was a reality. So, we all hear about the Maya being without a wheel, but the Maya in Mesoamerica did not possess beasts of burden. The potential candidates for beasts of burden had gone extinct. The kinetic energy for transport was provided by manpower using Mayan technology. I don't know if everybody knows that these two beasts of burden, the horse and the camel, originated in North America, particularly in Canada and south into North America. They split up into 2 groups, 2 herds. One went over the Bering Land Bridge into Siberia and became domesticated by the Europeans and the Asians and powered all the mighty empires, the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans, and took over the world. This is what the Maya had. Oh, I'm sorry. What happened to the deer? I'm sorry. What happened to the horse and the camel in the Americas? Something happened. Nobody knows quite. They call it the Holocene extinction. All the large animals, and the mammoths and the short-nosed bear and the ground sloth and the saber-toothed tiger all went extinct about the same time. There may have been some kind of meteoric burst or something like that, but they all disappeared. And Europe wound up with the beast of burden. So what could the Maya do? They didn't have any beast of burden. This was their choice, which was slim and none. You have a deer or a tapir, and you know they're not very good. So they used manpower. They developed a device called the metapal, or we call it a tump line, where the metapal went over the head and uses the spinal column as a column, strength column, and carry the loads. The power of the tump line technology to transport the weight of the Mayan civilization enabled a single porter to transport 125 pounds over large distances, and it's still in use today. A porter was able to carry this distance, which was, most of the porters only weigh 125 pounds, so they carried their own weight, and they could go on 2 pounds of corn. So this is a sketch that I did one day. I was sitting out in the field doing nothing, and this is I saw a guy carrying a load of wood, and I thought, what a natural idea for carrying materials. You see how the load goes right down the spine, into the hips, and down into your legs and feet as supports. These really worked out well, and they use it for everything. They use it for transport and construction and agriculture. And I've got a few shots on. This is a mural, an ancient mural of a tump line bear, and I've shown this a little closer. He's carrying a large jug of something here, but look at the rope work, and he's got every vector covered there. All you former Boy Scouts and sailors can name those knots. And the explorers found ways to get around without walking by using a chair. This is a shot taken in Mexico in the 30s. Look at the size of that. It's light, but it's unwieldy. And this is a picture I love, this old man. Still using it. It's a man carrying a load of wood. And in Kobah, you got to learn early. So I get the question all the time. Why did the Maya, how did they move those big rocks? Well, the Maya didn't use big rocks. They used small rocks because they used a man-sized rock that could be carried on a tump line. That way they could carry them cross country, they could carry them uphill, they could go downhill and climb up construction sites, like Michael Guillen here. I told him he should have had a bigger rock, it would have looked better. So that's how they transported their goods. Oh, got to do it again, Tom. Okay, so what if you did have a big rock? I came up with a solution for that too. I call it moving the big banana. This is a photograph that Vilas took along the road when he was doing a survey in 1934. Here is a stone cylinder that I encountered. I've encountered several at Santa Rosa Istenbach. These are the way they move large stones. The Romans did it. They take the large stones, they'd carve 2 axles into them, set the axles into lead, and use beasts of burden to pull them. Well, the Maya didn't have beasts of burden, so they had to use manpower. So this is a logical way of using rails along a sock bay and wrapping about 100 feet of rope, which they had lots of, and they invented it basically, and pull 100 feet and then wrap it back up again and pull it again. It's a logical and practical way of carrying large loads. The wheel. Why didn't they use the wheel? Okay, let's say, this is a good one for engineers. Let's say we decide to use a wheel and use manpower to pull it. So we build a cart, it's 1,000 pounds. We need 8 guys carrying 125 pounds each to pull that cart. No load. Let's put a load in it. We've got 1,000 pounds load, we've got 1,000 pounds of cart. We're gonna need 8 more men. So it needs 16 men to carry the cart plus a load. So what we wind up with, the men only carrying 62.5 pounds apiece on 2 pounds of corn a day. That's important, the corn part. So, the inefficiency of a wheeled cart requires 16 men to pull a load of 1,000 pounds. Single man with a cart pulls net load of 62.5 pounds on 2 pounds of corn. A single man with a dump line would transport 125 pounds of net load on 2 pounds of corn per day. So, conclusion is, the wheel in a cart just didn't make sense without beasts of burden. Across the shining seas, they had great vessels that sailed across the shining seas. How do we know? We know because the navigator told us. These are some of their routes, and they went across the Caribbean and down to Central America and north to Mexico in these cargo canoes. And they weren't canoes, they were real boats. I'll show you in a minute. This is some of the clues we have to what the boats look like. This is from a mural at Chichen Itza, which you weren't permitted to see either. This is a great navigator. On Columbus's fourth voyage, 1504, he encountered a Maya canoe. No, the Maya didn't disappear. They just didn't have the big cities anymore, but they were great traders. Here's an 80-foot long, as Columbus said, it was longer than my caravel boat with a cabin amidships with 30 rowers carrying many goods and many passengers. He was very impressed. He boarded, and of course he looted everything he could, but the most valuable thing aboard was cotton cloth. He had never seen it, and Europe hadn't seen cotton cloth before. You know where cotton came from, the Maya. So anyway, that's how we know what they look like. He didn't draw a picture like I did. I sort of cribbed a little bit. I did have some help. I had worked with a naval architect who'd been studying them for years, and I designed a boat. He said, they didn't build from these plans. This is the art naval architect. I said, I know. That's just so people read the book and build their own Maya, vessel. But we know what they look like because just recently, one part of one was found in Guatemala. It was about 40 feet long and about 5 feet wide. It has all the same characteristics, which I have in the drawing. So they made these out of a single log. It could be avocado, it could be chico zapotle, it could have been mahogany. The trees get to 15 feet in diameter there. And this is what we have now. We have the dugout canoe with a 200 horsepower engine on it. All the paddlers have retired. And navigation aids, they built lighthouses. This is on Isla Mujeres, where you were, Kim. This is at the end. And this is at Playa del Carmen, where this was actually a lighthouse where you turned left or west to east to get to Cozumel. So, the bridge. This was my first big breakthrough, was finding a bridge. It turned out to be the longest bridge in the ancient world. I'm pretty proud of that. But they rose to the challenge of bridge technology from short spans to the longest bridge in the ancient world. This is a short span, as you can see. This is a plank. It's just stone. And they made bridges in their architecture, flat slabs and arches. This is a sort of causeway across a canal. And then we get the bridges that are 50 feet in length. This is the remains of a bridge at Playa Sal. And this drawing I have made up shows the two abutments with they could have used a wooden beam here, spanning across, and stairways going up to the top. And people say, why didn't you build a ramp? Well, because this is in a valley, and when the flood season comes, if you built ramps, you would have had a real big dam across there, and it would have absolutely flooded the whole area. So they didn't have a ramp. So long span bridges, the Incas have got all the press because they had bridges in place when the Spanish came. So they wrote about them, and everybody's read the Bridge of San Luis Rey, and we know about the Incas, and they made bridges, but they weren't that long, 110 feet. But we got to see the Mayas to see how they didn't have gorges across where they had the abutments already built. They had to build their own. So, but suspension bridge building was in there in their patrimony. This is 1875 of chaps building a suspension bridge across a river in Guatemala. The longest bridge in the ancient world, at the ancient city of Mayan. This city became a virtual island during the rainy season because of the shape of the omega they were on. Zoom in here, we can see the Usamasita River, and we can see the Big Bend, the Big Oxbow, the omega, and the city is right there at the top. And 6 months a year, this river swelled to 45 or 50 feet deep and 600 feet wide. They had to have a lifeline, a year-round lifeline. That was my first drive. I said they couldn't live here and have a big city unless they had something to cross. So I first encountered this in 1989. Yep, these are my dugouts I went down in. We had to sleep underground and used machetes. They've all changed now. They got hotels. Anyway, this is my first view of the one of the piers that was in the river that was part of the bridge and the other side. And I knew it wasn't just a pile of rocks because you can see they were worked rocks and they had concrete inside. So I went home and started doing research, and I found that this is Ian Graham's map, which shows the pier here in the river. This is a photograph taken in 1882 by Albert Maudsley, who was the first archaeologist there. See, he thought enough of the pier to draw a picture of it and show it on his map. And everybody kept calling it the pile of rocks. Temple to the turtle god, toll gates, guard station. I'm going, nah, I was smarter than that. So 1991, I had a friend who took some aerial photographs. If you look closely, you can see Rick Myers, a Canadian bush pilot, who flew that route for me, okay? He spent his winters down in the tropics. Anyway, this is the photos he got, and there I have the underwater pier and the pier on the other side. So with this, I was able to take angles with the shore and the bank and the city and start developing a plan of the bridge. Then I had to figure out how it was made. 1993, I went back to the site, discovered some unbelievable things. This is a rope keeper. You can see where the rope was here, it wore. This was at the top of one of the towers. And this is, I showed this earlier, this is the approach on the plaza to the bridge. You walked on this and walked across the river. It was like, welcome to Yashilan sign. And I took, you can see the yellow markings there. I shot, yes, I had to use my Bruton compass and shoot back, cut my way into the jungle, shoot forward, and then take a back sight. Some of you guys know what those are, right? And make sure that I was really on the money, and I hit structure 5. So, 94 came back. I had pretty much everything verified by computer, but I wanted to make sure that I've reconfigured the maps so they correlated with all of the dimensions we had. And then we started plugging in the computer. Here's a computer survey of the center line of the bridge in structure 5 here. The profile, you can see it was a suspension bridge made out of rope cable. That rope is 20,000 pounds a square inch, by the way, and it didn't have much of a load to carry. And here we are with the plan and the piers, which were pretty high. And people say, well, why are they 75 feet high? Why did they have to be so high? I said, well, because in the rainy season, they had high water and the trees would come down and they'd have branches and all kinds of, the trees would be 8 foot in diameter. And they needed to secure the walkway well above the water. So how was it built? Well, they built it like they built everything else. Outside wall of stone and filled with concrete, lower the diameter, some more stone, filled with more concrete, and so on and so forth, till we got to the top and built a Maya arch. Tom, I think you're going to have to do it again. I told you we're going to get a machine. Okay, now, this is the longest bridge in the ancient world. And the next longest bridge was built in this was built around 700, give or take. It could have been 600, I don't know. Could have been 800, but that's still many. The next longest bridge was like 2 feet longer, was built in Italy in 1377. And we'll take a little tour down the bridge, take a look at our bridge, its towers, the pride of Maya engineering. This is our best engineering project. Well, let's walk across the bridge and say hello to the king and queen. That's Bird Jaguar and Lady Zoc. We have a wooden deck and rope hangers. We have to replace those every year, by the way. And say hello to the king and queen. So I threw this in to show you what, just like with the roads, what would I have done now? This is a Google Earth. Look at these two piers right here. I didn't have to go down there. I could have done it all from Google Earth. Look, you just saw a line between them, and I got all the structures lined up. But you know what? There's something about being called Indiana Jones was good. So, the collapse of the scientific civilization. Oh, I'm over by 5 minutes. This will only take a second. The Mayan collapsed around 900, and I'll show you what Mother Nature did and what technology, who built a huge population, could not stop. In the 8th century, the Mayan technology enabled an oversized population living in the largest cities in the world, Western world. 100,000 people in several cities was bigger. London was 9,000, Paris was 10,000, so you can see these guys had big cities. Now, technology provided dependable supplies of water in a seasonal desert and a surplus of food for people to eat, plus trading due to agricultural sciences. So this population of 15 million lived in an environment that could normally support 2 million persons without technology. With technology, you had a supply and demand. So technology provided water management, surplus of agricultural need, yield, and infrastructure for large cities. Mother Nature slammed the Maya with a tragic catastrophe. The most severe drought in 7,000 years, lasted 350 years, from 750 to 1100 AD. Thanks to my fellow geologists and our meteorologists who've done a lot of paleometeorology and paleoclimatology, we've proved this with all kinds of methodologies that this drought did occur. The effect of the drought, based on historic data, well, I just said that, didn't I? So, how did Maya technology contribute to the disaster? The deforestation was huge. It was due to demands for wood fuel for domestic use and cement production. Overuse of agriculture caused land erosion. A result was a rise in the ambient temperature. The failure of Maya technology based on a predictable supply of water caused a collapse. The water reserves were depleted. Agriculture failed. Infrastructure and society of the great cities collapsed. The difference between life and death was water, just like now. So it didn't happen overnight. It took 100 years or so. Number one is the first period down at the lower part of the chart. Number two was the second to fail, and the last to go was in the areas of the natural wells. And then it fell last. At the end, people were overwhelmed by the brutal forces of nature. Population died from thirst, starvation, and disease. Death resulted from civil unrest and invasion from city-states seeking food and water. Maya died from the lower classes upward. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse rode roughshod across the Yucatan and took their toll. After the catastrophe, 98% of the population were dead. Only 300,000 survived. The grand cities were abandoned and were never reoccupied. The vines and tendrils creeped into the empty cities and claimed the streets, palaces, temples, and pyramids for the encroaching jungle. Only the howler monkeys remained to roar their salutes to the former glory of the Maya. Dios Baltitish. Thank you. Deus Politesh. Thank you. I'm sure I got a few questions. I had more questions last night from. My goodness.
I've been reading a book gradually. It's written by a French fellow. You're probably familiar with it, but I don't think it mentions what you found.
Could you get closer to the mic?
I've been reading a book gradually called, I think, Ancient History of Water, Ancient Water. I can't remember the title. I'm only partway through it, but it's written by a fellow from France. History of Water Engineering through Civilization, but it's focused very much in Europe and Asia. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not, but there's lots of them out there.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just interesting. I found that book very interesting.
There are some amazing tricks that the ancient engineers used to create water or move water, and it was just the Maya used something that I haven't gone that deep into it. And now I'm just convincing archaeologists that they had reservoirs. That's step one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, question?
That limestone bullet that purified water.
Yes.
How long did it, and what drove the conclusion that that was what it was, a water filtration device?
Good question. You thought I just walked up and looked at it and said, that's a filter. I never saw a filter like that before. In 1893, a man named Auguste Leponge and his wife, Madame Leponge, who were slightly off, they came from the kingdom of Mu, they said. But anyway, they got into the ruins of Chichen Itza, and they excavated this particular structure, which was called, after they dug it up, it was called the Temple of the Cones. Now they call it the Temple of the Venus, because there's Venus carved inside. And they found them aligned deep inside the structure, all standing vertically with their cone shape downward. Okay, they drug them out and laid them on the ground. Going forward 20 years, we have our friend Morley, I just talked about, who did the real excavation on that particular structure. And he found those particular elements laying outside of the structure and photographed them. So I have their drawings, I have his photographs, and I have, right now, the part that really is the fascinating one. There's 152 of those, and they're laying in a light, like a chicken wire fence just outside of the structure in the open. Nobody knows what they are. Archaeologists don't know. They all say, I don't know. I said, I guarantee you that was a water plant, because it has a place up top to put water so it'll seep down. It'll seep down into the filters, and it's right above the sacred cenote, which you remember, and right near the other cenote. So nobody's telling me I'm wrong yet. I was almost afraid to put that one in the book, but that's a good question. You're the first person to question those. I don't know. Maybe they weren't. They look good. Hey, listen, a lot of stuff we believe. I remember when I talked about plate tectonics when I was in college, everybody thought that this guy came up with the plate tectonic theory was crazy. You know, we know he wasn't. He was right. Did I see another question? Yes.
Did you find any art or sculpture, if they used that to help identify tools, not yourself but others, existing art that helped identify how the culture?
No, I didn't. I have not. Well, my wife did find a painting one year, a small in a niche, but it was just like a doodle. But that was art, right? But most of the stuff, sadly to say, has been looted. Some of these places like Yashilan, which is so far away and distant from transportation, they've been pretty safe. The Germans fly in with helicopters. They actually consider putting anti-aircraft guns in, but they have taken large parts of temples. But no, I have not found any art, and I have not taken anything off the sites. Nope. I had to think. It's been a long time, 42 years. Sir? Yes, sir.
this drought that lasted so incredibly long, was it localized, or was it like just to the Yucatan Peninsula, or was it fairly widespread?
Well, the drought?
Drought, yeah.
Oh, it was widespread. It was, not only did they have the drought that lasted 350 years, they had eruptions of 6 tropical volcanoes in the area, which put tremendous amounts of ash and sky darkening materials and all kinds of other bad stuff that volcanoes do. But it also affected to the people to the north. Now, the Maya were the only population that had record keeping, and they were also keeping records of the dates and when they failed. And we have some of those to rely on. We know when the last one was inscribed, it was in the year 910, but the Aztecs didn't come along for another 400 years, and the conquest didn't come along for 600 more years. So the big drought was pretty much over, but it did extend to the southwestern United States, because that's when the Anasazi and those folks disappeared. Plus, there's a climatology link. When it's cold in the north, like northern Europe, it's dry in the south, like in the Yucatan. So they had all the records from the Roman Empire. They had, not the early part, but from Sweden and other countries that could write about that time, that could pass on records. That was a long time. Sir?
Wasn't that the period of Viking expansion also?
You're right. The Vikings were working they were looking for some, I think, some warmer territory, because they were right in the middle of where it was cold. And that's when they had the little ice age. Remember reading about that? It was the Dark Ages.
I think it was getting warmer in Iceland and the Nordic countries at that time, because they settled Greenland sometime around 900 AD, and they had to abandon when it got cold around 1300 and something.
Well, I'd have to check that out. Anybody else? Kim?
Could you just talk a bit about the ball and how they actually made
Oh, yes, yes.
the game that they played?
Kim was at Chichen Itza 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he was fascinated by the ball court there, where they played their game called Poktabok. And they used a rubber ball, a bouncing rubber ball. Well, the West didn't see bouncing rubber balls until vulcanization and Charles Goodrich, but the Maya knew how to vulcanize their rubber, because rubber came from, the Central America. And they made it with the latex plus the juice from the morning glory vine, which had sulfides in it. So what they do is start with how they made it? Is that what you're talking about, Cam? Yeah. They start with a ball, circular ball, round ball of clay. And they start layering it with this rubber that had been treated with vulcanization, and because it was hot and it was liquid. And they'd build up layers until they got the appropriate level, 2 inches. And then they'd break the interior ball and put a little slit in it and get all the pieces out, and then repair it. They had a real nice ball, like a basketball. So it was very lively.
Are there any signs of the survey tools that were used at that time?
The what, sir?
The survey tools for surveying roads, for example?
Survey?
Like laying out straight
Oh,
lines?
no, we don't have any tools, but we know we can learn a lot. And I did learn a lot from watching modern Maya lay out buildings, et cetera. And they use the North Star, and they use right angles, and they use water levels, et cetera, to lay out buildings. There's a little discussion in the book about that. Well, there's one more, okay?
Great talk. When you started in all this, you say it's been almost 30 years now as an engineer, or you're not an archaeologist, but you've done
Uh, in the 60s, when I first started working after college, I went to live in Spain, and I got an interest in archaeology from that, and then I came back and I started reading more about, because I'd been reading about the Aztecs and the Maya, mostly about the Aztecs and Inca, because there wasn't much written on the Maya then. So I took a year off and went down in my Volkswagen bus and spent time among the Maya ruins and started feeling a kinship with our fellow engineers, and kept up the work until I made the big discovery in '89, and that got me really, really going. But to answer your question, I had to make enough money as an engineer to afford to be an archaeologist. Well, thank you. I appreciated coming to visit you all up here. And
Thank you, James. Your presentation was amazing. I feel very privileged to be part of a profession that dates back thousands of years. As an expression of our appreciation for the time and effort you invested in making this presentation, here is a small gift to remember us by. On behalf of New Brunswick's 5,500 engineers and geoscientists, thank you so much for sharing your adventures and discoveries with us.
thank you.
Thank you. We hope that you and everyone else here will be able to join us for the recognition lunch from noon, beginning at noon, it says noon to 1:30 next door in ballroom A and B if you've registered. I'm on my way over there at probably 11:30, so thank you.
I have some books if somebody's just to buy it, and be outside. Right?
Yeah, that's
Tell them
great.
that.
Also, is it on the table, sir, James? There are some books for sale outside the doorway. Thank you.